Good morning, everyone. I am Rodriguez M. Galante. Together with Ma'am Michelle P. Engbino, we are tasked to report about the methodology in qualitative research, particularly in the research sampling, instrument, and the ethical consideration of qualitative research. And now let us begin with sampling in qualitative research. Sampling method in qualitative research. So sampling involves selecting units or people from a population for research purposes. So basically, sampling is all about selecting individuals or target respondents who can help in our research study. In other words, sampling is the selection of subset of the population of interest in research study. For qualitative research, there is less emphasis on having probability sampling to get a representative population for the study since it is not possible to get data from the entire population using a set of criteria based on our research questions and gather data from them. For example, we may choose to research students with disabilities in particular school and search for respondents in that chosen criteria. So in sampling method, it is very qualitative research sampling is very far different from the quantitative research sampling because in the quantitative, we can use probability in identifying sample from the population. On the qualitative research, we can just identify individuals or participants who suits or who is qualified in our criteria that is given in our study. Just like this example below, we may choose to research students with disabilities in particular school, and this kind of research, we can already identify that students, that only students with disabilities are qualified to participate in this study. In research, there are two kinds of sampling method. First, we have the probability sampling method, and the second is the non-probability sampling method. Now, probability sampling method, it is commonly or mainly used in quantitative research. Why? Because probability sampling means that in every sample or every member of the population has a chance to be selected to participate in our study. While on the non-probability sampling method, it is more on applicable in qualitative research. So we have here the 5 different types of sampling for the non-probability sampling method. First, we have the purposeful sampling. Next is the quota sampling, snowball sampling, convenience sampling, and the voluntary response sampling. Now let us begin with purposeful sampling in the non-probability sampling method. So in the purposeful sampling, the participants are selected when they qualify in the criteria set by the researcher. Let's take a look with the example that is provided below. The research may conduct a study on students who have single parents in a particular school. Students who fit this criteria may then be selected, the number of which is determined by the researcher beforehand. So in this kind, in the example that is provided, what do you think is the qualification in participating this kind of study? So students who have single parents are qualified to participate in this kind of study because students who have single parents are one of the main basis of the criteria in selecting participants of this study. So one of the uh, advantages of purposeful sampling is that the researcher has the ability to select or has the opportunity to select their participants in conducting their study. purposeful sampling. In purposeful sampling, it has several types and uses. This includes the following. First, we have the typical case sampling. So what is typical case sampling? It is where the subjects are chosen because of their normality. Or in other words, participants are generally chosen based on their likelihood of behaving like everyone else, sharing the same characteristic or experiences. But we have to take note that our goal in typical case sampling is to illustrate a phenomenon and not to make generalized statements about the experience of all participants. For this reason, typical case sampling allows us to compare samples and not to generalize samples to population. Next is we have the extreme or deviant case. The participants are selected because of their unusual in order to understand a particular phenomenon. Next is we have the total population sampling. If the number of the participants that meets a particular criterion is small, the researcher may select all of them for the study. Let's say, for example, only a small number of individuals qualified in our studies. Then we can take all of them to participate in our study because it only covers a little amount of individual. Now, in the expert sampling, participants of this study are chosen according to their expertise related to the research topic. Let's say, for example, we are conducting exploratory research, and exploratory research is suitable in this kind of sampling because we can use the expertise of an individual to conduct this kind of study. So it would be a big help if we have someone that is very expert in a certain field, especially in natural sciences or uh, more on experiments in science. We can use their expertise and in this kind of study. Next is we have the maximum variation sampling and the homogeneous sampling. So in the maximum variation sampling, it is an heterogeneous sampling, which it covers a wide range of variations. While on the other hand, homogeneous sampling only covers or it reduces variations. Now let's talk about quota sampling in the non-probability sampling method of a qualitative research. So what is quota sampling? The researcher may determine the number of participants beforehand, and the process of selecting the participants continues until this number is met. For example, if the study is about college students' perceptions of Philippine politics, the researcher may group the participants into specific characteristics such as age, educational level, gender, socioeconomic status, and etc. The proportion of these subgroups are then determined based on the population and the sampling is done afterward. Let's say, for example, we are aiming or we have a quota of 100 respondents for our research study. Now we are going to divide these 100 participants into different proportions. Let's say for example that 50% of our participants belong to ages from uh, 18 to 24 years old. And the other proportion, let's say for example 20% has an are belong from third year to fourth year students, and the remaining uh, proportion are their social that belongs to a certain socio-economic status. So it is where quota sampling is done by meeting the numbers of our desired participants. Next is the snowball sampling of the non-probability sampling method of qualitative research. So snowball sampling usually starts by initially contacting a small group. This method is especially helpful when recruiting hard-to-find participants that share special cases or interests. So in this kind of sampling, the researcher can ask the respondents if he or she knows someone that is also a potential in our study. Let's say, for example, that our target respondents is a person who are collecting old coins and paper bills. After we identify an respondents or participant, we can then ask them if they knew someone that are doing the same thing with them. So this is possible since collectors have a strong connection with other collectors. But the downside here is also representativeness, as you have no way of knowing how representative your sample is due to the reliance on participants recruiting others. This can lead also to sampling bias. Next is the convenience sampling. So convenience sampling is simply includes the individuals who happen to be the most accessible to the researcher. This is an easy and inexpensive way to gather initial data, but there is no way to tell if the sample is representative of the population. So among of all the sampling method in qualitative research, this one is the most accessible and convenient for the researcher since it can be conducted based on the geographical proximity, availability, and time and the willingness to participate in the study. However, convenience samples are at risk for both sampling bias and selection bias. Next is the voluntary response. So, similar to convenience sampling, a voluntary response sample is mainly based on ease of access. Instead, the researcher choosing participants and directly contacting them, people volunteer themselves. So, in this kind of sampling, it is where an individual can voluntarily respond to the researcher to participate in the study. So this can be done by responding to a public online survey. So based on this kind of sampling, especially when we are using online platforms, we can sometimes it appears on our end that we can participate in the study. So it's up to us if whether to participate or not to the study. However, voluntary response samples are always at least somewhat biased, as some people will inherently be more likely to volunteer than others, leading to self-selection bias. And now let us take a look at the sample size table below based on each research design. So in the first column, we have the research design of a qualitative research. We have the case study, ethnography, phenomenology, grounded theory, and the narratives. So the sample size of case study and ethnography is it's up to us if how many participants are we going to include in our study. So it depends on our target on us if how many target respondents are we going to include in our research study. While in the phenomenology, so it varies between 5 to 25%, grounded theory 20 to 60 persons, and the narrative in which 1 to 2 persons that can be part of our study. And now let us move on to the research instrument. So what is research instrument? Research instruments are tools used for data collection and analysis. Common examples of research instruments are interviews, surveys, observations, and focus groups. So when we are conducting our study, we have research instrument also because it is one of the tools that we can gather data from our respondents. Without research instrument, we can conduct our study. So in the research instrument, first we have the interview. So interview is a qualitative research method that collects data by asking questions. It includes three main types: structured, unstructured, and semi-structured interviews. Compared to other instruments, interviews provide reliable results and allow the interviews to engage and connect with the participants. However, it requires experienced interview to drive the best response from the interviewees. So in the interview, it is where the researcher and the interviewee got to have an interaction by collecting data from our participants. So let us discuss the three main types of the interview. The, the three main types of interview, which are the structured and unstructured, semi-structured interviews. So first we have the structured interview. Structured interviews includes an ordered list of questions. These questions are often close-ended. So when we say close-ended, it is answerable by yes or no, or a short answer from the respondents. Structured interviews are easy to execute by leave little room for spontaneity. While on the other hand, unstructured interviews are the opposite of structured interviews since it is answerable by open-ended question, considering that the respondents may ask uh, to our research question pertaining to the question what, why, and how. And the participants can express themselves more freely and elaborate on their answers. And the third is semi-structured interviews. So these are the blend of structural and unstructured interviews. They are more organized than unstructured interviews, though not as rigid as structured interviews. Here are the tools that we can use in conducting interviews with our respondents. First, we have the audio recorder. We can use audio recorder when we are going to gather data in a face-to-face setting. While cam recorder or camera recorder and video conferencing tools can be used in online interview. But we have to consider that the data that we are able to record using audio or camera conferencing tools, we have to transcribe their response so that we can have a deep analysis on their response, especially in conducting thematic analysis uh, based on their answers to our interview. So the next type of research instrument is survey. So survey is another primary data collection method that involves asking a group of people for their opinions on a topic. However, surveys are often given out in a paper form or online instead of meeting the respondents face to face. So I believe that all of us are very familiar with these surveys because we commonly receive this kind of surveys, especially in our schools when our students are conducting their practical research. And nowadays, surveys can also be done through online platforms especially by the use of Google Documents. We can just send it to our participants uh, and gather data through online platforms. The most common form of a survey is a questionnaire. It is list of questions to collect opinion from a group. These questions can be closed-ended, open-ended, pre-selected answer, or scale ratings. Participants can receive the same or alternate questions. So by the way, surveys can be used in qualitative and quantitative research. So we have the scale ratings in the quantitative research and a closed and open-ended questions that can be done also when we are conducting our qualitative research. Next, we have the observation. It is another research instrument for marketers to collect data. It involves an observer watching people interacting in a controlled or uncontrolled environment. Observation is an easy to execute and also provides highly accurate results. So observation, it is more on like observing the things that is around you or observing certain study that is part of your research. However, these results might be subjected to observer bias, which lowers the fairness and objectivity. Also, some types of observations are not cheap. Next is we have the focus group. Focus group are similar to interviews but include more than one participant. It is also a qualitative research method which aims to understand customers' opinions on a topic. Focus groups often consist of one moderator and a group of participants. Conducting focus groups are quick, cheap, and efficient. So focus group, it is like more on having an interaction with your target respondents in wherein you will serve as the moderator and collecting different insights or suggestions from your respondents. However, the data analysis can be time consuming. Engaging a large group of people is tricky and many participants may be shy or unwilling to give their opinion. So these are one of the things that we have to consider in conducting focus group. Next is the existing data. Existing data is an instrument for secondary research. Secondary research means using data that another researcher has collected. Secondary data can save a lot of research time and budget. Sources are also numerous, including internal, within the company, and external, or within outside the company sources. So in the external data, it is more on like using the existing data from the other researcher. So in the research instrument design means creating research instruments to obtain the most quality, reliable, and actionable results. It is an intricate process that requires a lot of time and effort from the researchers. A few things to keep in mind when designing a research instrument. First, we have to test the validity of our research. Means how will the participants answer match those outside the study. And we have also considered the reliability, replicability, and the generalizability. So these are the things that we have to consider in order for us to have a good type of research. So for the next reporter, Ma'am Michelle will report about the ethical considerations of conducting qualitative research.
Okay, thank you, Sir Dorante. Now let's proceed to ethical considerations. Definitions of ethical considerations. Ethical considerations in research refers to guidelines and principles which researchers must adhere to as they conduct their research. Research often involves face-to-face interaction with people, as researchers study behaviors and test the effects of certain phenomena on a target population. Ethical considerations dictate the nature of such interactions and ensure research is done per the set rules and principles. Why are ethical considerations necessary? Ethical considerations are important because they promote research objectives, including avoidance of error, truth, and knowledge. Ethical considerations prohibit false interpretation and misrepresentation of facts in deriving conclusions from any research undertaking. In ethical considerations, there are several types of ethical issues. So first, we have voluntary participation. Second, informed consent. Third, anonymity. Fourth, confidentiality. Fifth, potential for harm. And last, result communication. Voluntary participation. Voluntary participation means that all research subjects are free to choose to participate without any pressure or coercion. All participants are able to withdraw from or leave the study without feeling guilt, or the participants have no, let's say, they don't have to provide any reasons why they want to exit or not to continue to participate in your research. Okay, it is important to make it clear to the participants that there are no negative consequences if they refuse to participate in the research. Next is informed consent. Informed consent refers to a situation in which all potential participants receive and understand all the information they need to decide whether they want to participate. This includes information about the study's benefits, risks, funding, and institutional approval. So in this part, to conduct this study, of course, informed consent must be presented first before to conduct the research. Um, okay, anonymity. Anonymity in research means that the identity of research participants should be kept secret by ensuring responses cannot be linked back to specific respondents. It can also imply that no personal identification data such as names and residential addresses are collected during the initial stages of the research. So as a researcher, we must use these pseudonyms in order to hide the identity of our research respondents. Next is the confidentiality. Most research projects involve the collection of personal data. Researchers must ensure the research participants' identity and responses are protected. All participants have the right to privacy. So, as researcher, we must protect their personal data for as long as we store it or use it. And of course, we must to ensure that no one or outside the research team could access the respondents' confidential information unless otherwise unless they are required by the legal bodies. Next is potential for harm. As researcher, you have to consider or possible sources of harm to participants. Harm can come in many different forms. First, we have psychological harm. Sensitive questions or tasks may trigger negative emotions, such as shame or anxiety. Next is social harm. Participation can involve social risk, public embarrassment, or stigma. And next is physical harm. Pain or injury can result from the study procedures. Last one is the legal harm. Reporting sensitive data could lead to legal risk or a breach of privacy. Next is the results communication. Communication of research results may raise ethical issues. Researchers are responsible for ensuring that they communicate the results honestly and credibly. Plagiarism is one of the most widespread ethical concerns in scientific research, where researchers unlawfully present other works, other work, other people's work as their own. Okay, we have here the most important principles related to ethical considerations by Bryman and Bell, 2007. First, research participants should not be subjected to harm in any ways whatsoever. Second, respect for the dignity of research participants should be prioritized. Third, full consent should be obtained from the participant before the study. Fourth is the protection of the privacy of research participants has to be ensured. Fifth, adequate level of confidentiality of the research data should be ensured. Sixth, anonymity of individuals and organizations participating in the research has to be ensured. 7. Any decision or exaggeration about the aims and objectives of the research must be avoided. 8 is affiliation in any form, sources of funding, as well as any possible conflicts of interest have to be declared. 9. Any type of communication in relation to the research should be done with honesty and transparency. And last, any type of misleading information as well as representation of primary data findings in a biased way must be avoided. So we have there the actual sample using the citation by Bryman and Bell 2007. Ethical considerations. The researcher will apply the principles of ethical consideration developed by Bryman and Bell 2007. In regard to the involvement to this study, the participants will not be subjected to harm in any ways. Prior to the study, full consent will be obtained from the participants, the students and teachers of Rizal National High School. In addition, the protection of privacy of research participants will be ensured. Voluntary participation of respondents in the research will be treated very important. Moreover, they have rights to withdraw from the study at any stage if they wish to do so. In handling the data, adequate level of confidentiality will be ensured. Any form of misleading information, as well as the representation of primary data findings in a biased way will be avoided. On the other hand, maintaining the highest level of objectivity in discussions and analysis throughout the research will be considered. Furthermore, affiliation in any form, sources of funding, as well as possible conflicts of interest will be declared. Lastly, any type of communication to this action research will be done with honesty and transparency. Questions. Why are ethical considerations important? Ethical considerations are important to protect the participants, to protect the research participants, and it also ensures the research findings are credible, honest, and valid. Next question is, what is the difference between anonymity and confidentiality in research? So, the difference between the anonymity and confidentiality is that anonymity refers to the actions undertaken by the researcher to ensure the participants' identity cannot be linked to their responses. While the confidentiality, it refers to the measures taken to ensure that no one outside the research team knows the participant's identity. And so here's my case study: ethical challenges in online teaching and learning, a case study of a virtual class. The purpose of this study is to explore the ethical challenges faced by the educators and students, and also the administrators who involved in the virtual class, and also gain a deeper understanding of the ethical challenges in online teaching and learning. Um, okay, here's our references, but before I end my presentation, would like to add my implications. So my implications in my topic is that in conducting research, a while ago I mentioned about the several types of ethical issues. So by addressing those considerations, we can ensure the that the qualitative research provides a rich insights into a complex social phenomena, while also protecting the participants' rights and respecting their dignity and maintaining research flexibility. And that will be all. Thank you. And we also prepare a quiz for this topic. So we will just give the link in or we will post the link in our GCRD Google Classroom. So here's the questions. Okay, and that will be all. Thank you and God bless.